Hi, my name is Amrita and this is my booktube. If you like book-related content, then hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Today, I'm talking about a few tropes that I'm sick and tired of and I think we can do better. First up is billionaires. Now, this particular trope feeds into yet another one that I discussed in my sex and shopping video. But basically, billionaire has sort of devolved into code for a man who is rich, powerful, and entitled to do whatever he wants without consequences. Now, this is obviously a character type that has existed for a very long time. In historical fiction, you'll see them being a duke, for example. There's somebody who is titled and rich and sort of beyond worldly consequences. It's just that today we think of billionaires as being those people. What really grinds my gears, though, is how little thought a lot of people put into the word billionaire. I mean, they can't be like, a 500 millionaire. They have to be a billionaire. And yet they're, about 29, 34, max 35 years old. But generally, they follow the 50 Shades of Grey rulebook, which is that they have to be below 30. And if you're a billionaire below the age of 30, then you are a very specific kind of person. And that person doesn't wear perfectly tailored Italian suits or have tons of time to go shopping with you or obsessing about what you ate for lunch. Now, obviously, if you are a billionaire, then it becomes a lot easier for the author to set the action, so to speak, in more exotic locations and have access to luxury items that are obviously, again, very crucial to a certain type of romance. But look, it's 2020. We're counting down the days to when we can eat the rich. And there's tons of really good stories that one can make about working class heroes or even white collar heroes. Next up is the virgin and the rake. Again, this is perhaps one of the oldest tropes there is. We expect men to be good in bed and have tons of experience, but women's seals can't be tampered. First off, virginity is fake. By which I mean that, the idea of virginity is not just the hymen, but it's also tied to this idea of chastity and moral superiority. And all you ever need to do is make friends with someone who went to a girls' school. And the moment you hear what 15-year-old girls are up to and what they talk about, even without ever having sex, you will know that virginity is a scam. It's also ruining actual real-world lives everywhere because there are real people out there who don't really understand how biology works and are convinced that the first time a woman has sex, there must be blood on the sheets. One of my favorite scenes in a historical romance was when this couple are forced to get married and then they don't consummate the marriage, but they need to show the sheets because, this is olden times and they have to display the sheets. And so the groom basically cuts his arm so he can bleed it out a little bit. And then they show the sheets to people and everybody is absolutely stunned. And there's an appalled silence in the room because everyone goes from yay, you had sex to, oh my God, is she still alive? What did this monster do to her? Honestly, it's so harmful. But also, I feel like men should be up in arms against this stuff because what we're generally telling them is that they don't really have the right to an experienced partner, one who knows how to give them pleasure. It puts the onus completely on the man to have a successful sexual relationship with his partner. I also saw a trailer for this other Twilight fanfic that sounds extremely like 50 Shades of Grey, and I think maybe they went to court over it, but I'm not sure. But I can't remember the name of it, but it has something to do with Dante's Inferno. I think the male character in it is an expert on the Inferno and teaches it exclusively. He's one of those special professors, But anyway, this trailer had the lead couple basically talk to each other and he kept asking her if it was her first time. So he would kiss her and then he'd be like, is this the first time that you've been kissed by a man? And she'd be like, yes. And then he'd be like, is this the first time that you have gazed upon the stars in a man's arms? And she would be like, yes. And one of the comments below the video, which made me crack up, was that if this is her first time doing everything, then maybe she needs to get out a little bit more. But more seriously speaking, the idea of a virginal heroine is basically an intensely patriarchal construct. It reduces women to quantifiable values, and it places impossible moral burdens upon women. And it's a real thing in many parts of the world, and it is disgusting. Romancelandia as a whole is one of the few places in the world in which women have so much power as content creators and consumers, and we really owe it to ourselves to hold ourselves to a better standard. It is entirely possible to write a story about characters who are sexually inexperienced without feeding into the whole virgin thing. Do better. Next up is the idea of youth. I was watching this one video over on Crystal's channel where the lead protagonist is a man who is 38 and is described as being ancient. And it made Crystal laugh and it made me laugh, but that's not an outlier in a lot of romance novels. There seems to be some sort of unspoken rule that the action must be between people in their 20s. And I think maybe it comes from older novels, Austen novels and Bronte novels, but you have to understand people live longer these days. We also look much better than our age contemporaries, say 100 years ago. A person who is 40 years old in 2020 looks way different than a person who was 40 in, say, 1920. Much less 1820. In fact, if you go back to 1620, you were probably dead by age 40. We aren't dying at age 40 these days, you guys. But also, older characters have so much more going on in their lives that you can weave into an interesting plot. I'm not saying young people are boring, but I'm saying that older characters don't need to be relegated to a ghetto called mature romances. I don't know where one got this idea that people won't read a romance between older people, especially when I know so many older women, and maybe older men, I don't know, but I know so many older people who read romances. And the problem with subdividing a genre that strictly and sending an entire category of characters into their own little special genre where, they're mature characters and they have mature love stories, as if, love is different when you are 60 versus when you are 20. It really isn't. If you're passionately in love with somebody, then you're passionately in love. The dynamics might be different, the obstacles might be different, but the emotion itself is just as intense and just as all-consuming as it can be when you are incredibly young versus, when you're older. And so I see very little reason for us to only see lead characters who are in their 20s or at the most their early 30s. Okay, last up is safe sex. No, I don't want to see less of it, I want to see more of it. Okay, confession time. You know how I have my Bad News Lovers series? And there's a reason why I don't have Christian Grey on that list, and that's because I DNF'd the first book about 20% of the way in. I know it's beloved for a great many of you, and I can see why, but the thing is, I grew up reading a lot of explicit romance, and I enjoy explicit romance, and I think there are way better versions of it, and honestly, a lot of the writing is just terrible in that book. And I saw no reason to inflict that upon myself, so I just DNF'd. I think it was one of the very first few books that I actually DNF'd. I mean, I've spoken before about how I had to evolve to a position where I would put a book down and The tag is up there. And I think E.L. James was one of the first few writers who helped me arrive at that decision. So thanks for that. Anyhow, the point is that I don't know what happens in the book per se, but when the movies came out, my friend Caroline and I went to watch it, and we were in Bangkok at the time, like we lived in Bangkok, and there used to be this thing called 100 baht Wednesdays. 100 baht converts to about $3. So, it's just a really cheap, fun date for the two of us to be having. We just get some popcorn, get something to drink, get into the theater, and then just watch whatever. We both like the movies, we like hanging out with each other. There you go. And I have this really strong memory of us sitting in that theater, and Caroline's one of those people who's like really prepared for every situation. So the theaters in Bangkok are freezing cold, so she always had like a scarf to cover up when it got too cold. And we were laughing so hard because the dialogues were so incredibly stupid. It was like somebody had written those dialogues out in another language and then used like Google Translate to convert them. And poor Jamie Dornan and Dakota Fanning were trying so hard to sell us on those dialogues, and we were giggling throughout, and we were stuffing her scarf into our mouths because we were surrounded by this pocket of Japanese women who were really into this film, and they were just eating it up with a spoon, and we were absolutely those obnoxious assholes that ruined the experience for everybody, and we didn't want to be those people, so we were trying to muffle ourselves, but we really couldn't. But anyway, the point being, what I remember of that movie is that it was really committed to safe sex, and I really enjoyed that. There are multiple points in the film, every time before he has sex with her, you will see him take out a condom, open it up, use it. I don't think you saw him put it on as such, but he definitely was using a condom. Now, back in the day, around the time we had the AIDS pandemic in the United States, the late 80s, early 90s, I think people were freaked out enough about sexually transmitted diseases, and we weren't really thinking about it as being a birth control measure, I think, but just for STDs, and you have all these romances that came out in the 90s in the wake of the pandemic, where the hero would use a condom or discuss how he was using condoms or he was used to using condoms. And it was really educational in many ways, and it normalized it for an entire generation of women. And I think that is incredibly valuable. And then over the years, as time went on, everybody sort of relaxed a little bit, and I don't know what happened, but now we are back to a stage where a lot of romances don't discuss safe sex. And I'm not saying a romance novel needs to be a PSA, but it is nice to normalize these things, especially to more impressionable younger audiences who might be discovering that sex is supposed to be pleasurable, and it is supposed to be guilt-free, and it is supposed to be between consenting adults. And in the middle of all this excellent information, you could also slip in the fact that sex should be safe. Normalize birth control, normalize condoms. What are some of the tropes that you think are terrible and up for a rehaul? Let me know in the comments. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.